Bola Tinubu did not win the 2023 presidential election from the Southwest alone. He won it because the North delivered. The APC's Northwest delivered its largest regional vote share. The Northeast held firm. The North Central was competitive. Without that northern delivery, Tinubu's 36.6% national vote share, the lowest winning percentage in Nigerian democratic history, would not have crossed the constitutional threshold in enough states to win outright. The North made Tinubu president. And now, 3 years into his administration, there are documented signals in polling, in political defections, in the language of northern governors, in the economic data from northern states, and in the emerging movements challenging APC dominance across the region, that the political relationship between the North and Tinubu's government is deteriorating in ways that could be decisive for 2027. The question AFRONEWSHQ is asking today is precise. Is the North actually turning against Tinubu? Or is what we are seeing noise, management challenges, and the normal friction of governing a diverse federation that eventually resolves in favor of the incumbent? The answer requires going beyond headlines. It requires looking at the specific economic, political, and institutional signals coming from the North right now. And that is exactly what we are going to do. Most channels will give you the headline. We give you the architecture behind it. If you've never been here before, you just found Nigeria's most analytical channel. Subscribe, because what comes next in this video is the part they hope you never piece together. What the North delivered for Tinubu in 2023, the precise numbers. Before we assess whether the North is turning, we need to establish precisely what it delivered in 2023 and why that delivery was structurally essential. In the 2023 presidential election, the APC's strongest regional performances came from the Northwest and Northeast. In Zamfara, the APC received 71% of votes cast. In Jigawa, 68%. In Katsina, 64%. In Kebbi, 63%. In Yobe, 87%. In Borno, 83%. These were not competitive performances. They were dominance figures, the kind of regional consolidation that makes constitutional threshold compliance straightforward and that inflates the national vote total significantly. The Northwest alone, 7 states, contributed more total votes to Tinubu's winning column than the entire Southwest, including his Lagos stronghold. Without northern delivery at those percentages, Tinubu's constitutional threshold arithmetic does not work in 2023. He knew it, his strategists knew it, and the northern political actors who delivered those numbers knew it too, which is why the post-election expectation of northern benefit from the Tinubu administration was not vague sentiment. It was a political invoice. The 3 documented signals of northern deterioration. The evidence that northern political sentiment toward Tinubu is shifting comes from 3 specific and documented categories. Signal Category 1. Economic pain data. Inflation in northern Nigeria has run at rates that disproportionately affect food insecure populations, and the North has a higher food insecurity rate than the South. The fuel subsidy removal's impact on transportation costs has been more severe in states where distances to markets are longer and road infrastructure weaker. The Naira's depreciation has reduced the purchasing power of northern populations who are more dependent on imported food staples. The economic pain of Tinubu's first 2 years landed harder in the North than in Lagos or Abuja. Signal Category 2. Northern political language. The language coming from northern governors, northern senators, and northern civil society organizations toward the Tinubu administration has shifted measurably since 2023. The deferential language of our president, which characterized the early post-election period from northern APC stakeholders, has given way to increasingly direct public criticism of federal policy on security, on fuel, on federal appointment distribution, and on the handling of the Northwest banditry crisis. Public criticism from within your own coalition is a leading indicator of political realignment. The specific northern governors whose public language toward Tinubu has shifted most dramatically, and what those shifts tell us about the political calculations of northern elected officials heading into 2027. We will return to them. The one economic variable that more than any other will determine whether northern sentiment becomes northern voting behavior in 2027. We will identify it precisely. The structural reasons northern sentiment is shifting. Northern political sentiment toward Tinubu is not shifting randomly. It is shifting along three structural fault lines that were always present in the APC's 2023 Northern Coalition and that were suppressed by electoral discipline but never resolved. Fault line 1. The federal appointment imbalance. The APC's 2023 Northern Coalition was built on an implicit promise that a Tinubu presidency, while southern in its figurehead, would ensure northern representation at the federal level commensurate with the North's electoral contribution. That promise has not been delivered to the satisfaction of northern political actors. The federal executive's most powerful positions, the central bank, the NNPC, the key security agencies, the economic management ministries, have been predominantly occupied by individuals whose geographic and political identity is southern or Lagos adjacent. Northern political figures who expected to see the kind of federal appointment distribution that their 2023 vote delivery justified have expressed those expectations through increasingly direct public statements. This is not simply an ethnic grievance, it is a political transaction complaint. The North delivered votes on the understanding that federal power would be shared. The distribution of that power has not matched the distribution of the electoral contribution. That gap between delivery and benefit is the most concrete driver of northern political dissatisfaction with Tinubu. Fault line 2. The security crisis as a political indictment. The Northwest's banditry crisis has not been resolved under Tinubu. Zamfara, Katsina, and Kebbi continue to experience kidnappings, community attacks, and displacement at levels that have persisted through multiple federal security initiatives without measurable reduction. For northern communities experiencing that insecurity daily, the federal government's security response is not an abstract policy question. It is the difference between their children attending school and not attending school, between their farmers accessing their fields and abandoning them, between their communities functioning and fragmenting. A federal government that cannot demonstrate measurable progress on northern security is a federal government that northern communities have a concrete reason to replace. The political implication: the security crisis converts what might otherwise be a manageable economic grievance into an existential political indictment. Voters who are physically unsafe under an administration's watch are voters who need no additional economic argument to justify changing their electoral choice. Fault line 3. The fuel subsidy removal's northern impact. The fuel subsidy removal, the most economically consequential single policy decision of the Tinubu administration, landed differently across Nigeria's regions. In Lagos, where incomes are higher, where public and private transport alternatives exist, and where the economy is more diversified, the impact was severe but manageable for a significant portion of the population. In Kano, in Sokoto, in Maiduguri, in smaller northern cities and in rural northern communities, the fuel price increase cascaded into food prices, transportation costs, generator costs, and the cost of every market transaction in ways that were more immediate, more total, and more politically resonant. The subsidy removal was a necessary economic decision by most serious analyses, but its political cost was distributed unequally across the country. The North bore a disproportionate share of that cost relative to its political contribution to the government that made the decision. That asymmetry is the foundation of the political resentment that Northern voices are now expressing. The North's political realignment is not driven by ideology, it is driven by unfulfilled transactional expectations. Nigerian political coalitions are not built on ideology, they are built on transactions, on explicit and implicit agreements about what each party to the coalition contributes and what it receives. The North's 2023 contribution to Tinubu's winning coalition was electoral. The expected return was representational: federal appointments, security deployment, infrastructure investment, and economic policies that did not disproportionately harm northern populations. 3 years into the administration, the northern political class's assessment is that the transactional balance has not been honored. When transactional expectations are not met in Nigerian politics, the response is not public ideological break, it is quiet repositioning, hedging bets, exploring alternatives, reducing the intensity of coalition loyalty, and creating the conditions for a different transactional arrangement at the next electoral cycle. That quiet repositioning is exactly what AFRONEWSHQ is observing in the northern political signals of 2026. The 2027 electoral implications: what a partial northern swing costs Tinubu. The critical question is not whether the entire North turns against Tinubu. It almost certainly will not. The APC has deep organizational roots in northern Nigeria, the emirate networks retain political influence in multiple states, and the patronage flows from the federal government to northern APC governors maintain party loyalty at the official level, even when popular sentiment drifts. The question is what a partial swing, a reduction of 5 to 10 percentage points in Tinubu's northern vote share, does to his 2027 constitutional arithmetic. In 2023, Tinubu reached the 25% threshold in 30 states. His margin above the threshold in most northern states was comfortable, 10 to 20 percentage points above the minimum. A 5 percentage point swing against him in 6 northern states does not lose him those states outright, but it could reduce his margin to the point where a well-organized opposition coalition, the Obi-ADC combination for instance, crosses the 25% threshold in those states from below. The constitutional arithmetic does not require the opposition to win a state, it requires the opposition to reach 25% in that state. And the difference between an opposition that reaches 25% in 24 northern and southern states combined and one that reaches it in 18 is entirely determined by marginal vote shifts in precisely the northern states where Tinubu's 2023 margin was comfortable but not invulnerable. Tinubu does not need to lose the North to lose 2027, he only needs to underperform in it. The misconception in most southern Nigerian political commentary is that the North turning against Tinubu means the North voting for the opposition. That is not the mechanism. The mechanism is margin compression. If Tinubu's Northwest performance falls from the 65 to 70% range of 2023 to a 55 to 60% range in 2027, driven by economic pain, security frustration, and unfulfilled appointment expectations, the opposition coalition's path to the 25% threshold in those states becomes navigable. Tinubu still wins those states. He wins them with fewer votes, and those fewer votes are exactly the margin by which the opposition crosses the constitutional threshold in states it could not reach in 2023. The North does not need to vote for the opposition, it only needs to vote for Tinubu with less enthusiasm than it did before. That reduction from dominance to comfortable majority is the mechanism through which 2027 becomes genuinely competitive. Now let us examine what the national implications of this shift are and the strongest counter-arguments that must be taken seriously. What a shifting North means for Nigeria's 2027 democratic landscape. The most significant national implication of northern political disillusionment with Tinubu is not electoral, it is institutional. When the North's political class begins to hedge its 2027 bets, when northern governors make public statements distancing themselves from federal policy, when northern senators align with opposition legislative positions, when northern traditional rulers reduce the visibility of their APC endorsements, it signals that Nigeria's political center of gravity is shifting from the presidency outward toward the states. That decentralization of political power, when it happens through electoral competition rather than through constitutional crisis, is a democratic health indicator. It means that no single political actor controls the political environment so completely that competitive accountability becomes impossible. A Tinubu who must compete for northern votes in 2027 rather than simply collect them is a Tinubu who must be responsive to northern policy demands in ways that improve governance. Competition produces accountability. Northern political independence from Tinubu, to whatever degree it materializes, is good for Nigerian democratic health, regardless of which side it ultimately benefits electorally. Resolving open loop number 1. The northern governors whose language has shifted most measurably. We said we would identify the northern governors whose public language toward Tinubu has shifted most measurably. The clearest examples come from Zamfara, Kano, and Sokoto. Zamfara's governor, Dauda Lawal, has been the most direct in public statements about the federal government's inadequate security response to banditry in his state. His language has moved from the post-election praise of a new administration to explicit documented criticism of federal security deployment, with the implicit suggestion that Abuja's attention and resources are insufficient for what Zamfara is experiencing. A governor of your own party saying publicly that the federal government's security response is inadequate is not loyalty. It is the first publicly expressed step of political distance. Kano's governor Abba Kabir Yusuf from the NNPP, not the APC, continues to represent Kwankwasia's independent political anchor in the Northwest. His very existence as a non-APC northern governor with a functional state administration is a daily demonstration that northern political independence from the APC is viable and sustainable. He does not need to criticize Tinubu directly. His political independence makes the argument. Sokoto's governor Ahmed Aliyu, APC, has navigated the Hausa-Fulani political tension in his state with increasing difficulty as the security crisis in Sokoto generates community pressure that his federal alignment makes politically costly. His public language has become notably more focused on state-level security autonomy and less focused on federal partnership, which is the language of a governor whose political survival calculation is shifting away from Abuja alignment. We said we would identify the single economic variable that decides northern voting behavior in 2027. It is food price inflation. Northern Nigerian households spend a higher proportion of income on food than southern urban households. When food prices rise, through the cascading effects of fuel cost increases on transportation, through naira depreciation's impact on imported food prices, through insecurity's disruption of farming communities, the political impact is felt most immediately and most viscerally in the north. The NBS's food inflation data for northern states has consistently shown rates above the national average since 2023. For ordinary northern voters, not political elites who measure political loyalty through appointments and contracts, but the market trader in Kano, the farmer in Katsina, the Okada rider in Gusau, the most concrete measure of whether this government is working for them is whether they can afford to eat. That measure has been moving in the wrong direction for 3 years. If food price inflation in the north is measurably lower in early 2027 than it was at its peak in 2024, northern voting behavior will moderate against Tinubu but not collapse. If food inflation remains at or above 2024 levels into the 2027 campaign season, the sentiment that is currently political commentary will harden into voting decisions. The strongest counter-argument. The most serious challenge to this analysis comes from Nigerian political practitioners with deep northern experience who argue the following. Northern political sentiment and northern voting behavior are two distinct things and they are separated by a machine. The APC's northern political machine, the ward-level party structure, the traditional ruler networks, the FAAC-funded state government patronage systems, the federal appointment holders whose loyalty is maintained through office, has historically delivered northern votes at levels well above what northern popular sentiment would predict. In 2023, significant portions of the northern population were economically stressed under Buhari. They still delivered massive APC votes because the machine delivered them. The machine's relationship with individual voters is not mediated primarily by policy satisfaction. It is mediated by social pressure, community loyalty, direct material incentives, and the absence of a credible local alternative. That counter-argument is not wrong. Nigerian electoral machines do deliver voters at levels that sentiment surveys do not predict. The question for 2027 is whether the machine's delivery capacity has been maintained, whether the patronage flows that sustain machine loyalty have been adequate, and whether a credible northern alternative to APC, specifically the Obi-ADC coalition with Kwankwasia and Atiku's northern network, represents a sufficiently organized competing machine to peel voters away from APC delivery. The North's 2027 vote will be decided not by sentiment, but by which machine reaches the polling unit agent first. Every northern political analyst who has run a campaign in Zamfara or Katsina will tell you the same thing. The voter who was planning to vote against the APC because of economic pain frequently does not vote against the APC because the APC's ward coordinator arrives at their house the morning of the election with reasons to reconsider. Those reasons are not always financial. They are sometimes social, community pressure, religious authority endorsements, the physical presence of organized political authority at the local level. The opposition's 2027 northern strategy cannot be built on sentiment surveys. It must be built on a competing machine that reaches the same ward coordinators before the APC does. Kwankwasia's Kano experience is the template for what that competing machine looks like when it works. Building it across 6 additional northwest states in 18 months is the operational challenge that will determine whether the North sentiment shift becomes an electoral result. Northern sentiment against Tinubu is real, documented, and growing. Northern voting behavior shifting in 2027 is probable but not certain. The gap between those two assessments is the machine, and whether the opposition can build one capable of translating sentiment into ballots at ward level before the APC's machine reasserts itself. Most likely next moves by each actor. Tinubu's most probable northern strategy for 2027 has 3 components. First, a visible security offensive in the northwest, a sustained military operation in Zamfara and Katsina, timed for maximum political impact before the 2027 campaign season, with measurable results communicated through northern state media. Second, a federal appointment reshuffle that increases visible northern representation in the administration's most prominent economic roles, specifically the CBN, the Finance Ministry, and the NNPC, to address the appointment imbalance grievance before it hardens further. Third, targeted fuel cost reduction for northern transport routes through CNG conversion subsidies, through kerosene price management, or through direct transport subsidy schemes that address the fuel subsidy removal's disproportionate northern impact. The ADC coalition's northern strategy, if it consolidates, must focus on translating Atiku's network relationships and Kwankwasia's Kano base into a ward-level agent structure across the 6 northwest states. The coalition's analytical advantage, knowing which northern communities are most economically distressed and therefore most politically persuadable, is only valuable if it is matched by an organizational presence that can activate that persuadability on election day. Northern governors within the APC will continue to manage the tension between their federal party loyalty and their local political survival. The ones in states where economic pain and security crisis are most acute will move toward greater public independence from Tinubu's positions without formally leaving the APC. That managed independence, staying in the party while criticizing the policies, is the northern political class's way of hedging without burning bridges. 3 signals to watch in the next 90 days. First, whether Tinubu conducts a federal appointment reshuffle with measurable northern representation improvement before mid-2026. A reshuffle that brings credible northern figures into the CBN, the Finance Ministry orbit, or the security architecture signals that the appointment grievance has been assessed as politically urgent. No reshuffle signals that Abuja believes the northern political machine will deliver regardless. Second, the NBS food inflation data for northern states in the next 2 quarters. Declining food inflation is the single most politically significant economic indicator for northern voter behavior. Stable or increasing food inflation is the most reliable predictor that northern dissatisfaction will harden into electoral consequence. Third, whether Kwankwaso makes a formal 2027 political declaration that includes the ADC coalition. A Kwankwaso who declares formally within the ADC opposition framework adds the most credible northern machine currently operating outside the APC to the opposition's ward-level infrastructure. His declaration or continued silence is the clearest signal of where the Northwest's organized political independence is heading. Is the North turning against Tinubu? The honest answer is, it is drifting, not turning, not revolting, drifting. The distinction matters. A turn implies a decisive shift in voting behavior. A drift implies a marginal movement in sentiment that has not yet translated into organized electoral opposition. Drifts become turns when 3 conditions align. The economic pain that drives sentiment does not improve. An organized opposition machine exists to convert sentiment into ward-level votes, and the APC's northern machine fails to deliver at the levels 2023 established. 2 of those 3 conditions are partially in place. The economic pain has not measurably improved for ordinary northern voters. An organized opposition machine is being assembled through the ADC coalition and Kwankwasia's network. What is not yet in place is a fully assembled ward-level infrastructure in the 6 Northwest states where the marginal vote shift matters most. Tinubu has a window. It is approximately 12 months. If his administration delivers measurable security improvement in the Northwest and measurable food price relief before the 2027 campaign season formally opens, the drift stops. If it does not deliver those 2 things, the drift continues, and at some point between now and February 2027, a drift becomes a turn. Watch the ultimate food inflation data. Watch the security results. Watch Kwankwaso. Those 3 variables will tell you, before any political announcement does, whether the North's drift is reversible, or whether 2027 is shaping up to be the most competitive Nigerian presidential election since 1993. You now know something that most Nigerians watching the news tonight do not know. What you do with it is up to you. Share it, debate it, challenge it. That is how democracies survive. AFRONEWSHQ. Nigeria deserves better analysis. See you in the next one.